with his documentary of Bob Lazar, Flying Saucers, wherever the actual title of it is. But that documentary is fantastic, and it's essentially going over Bob Lazar's story from the 1980s to today, which he's told the exact same story, which is nuts that you have one giant lie your whole life. Like, come on. There's a lot of weirdness to the story, obviously. Like there is with everything. There's a lot of people that want to discredit his background and all sorts of other things. But the reality of what he's saying is essentially what we're seeing in these crafts, which is very strange. So he described how these things worked and how they moved and how they would turn sideways and sort of like project this, whatever this reactor that they have inside of them. And he talked about this element 115. They have a stable version of it that was essentially just theoretical at the time in 1980. No one really knew whether or not that thing actually even exists, 89 or whatever it was. And that they would douse this thing, project radiation upon it, and it would create this warp, this gravity warp, this thing that allowed this craft to move in ways that defied our understanding of propulsion systems.
That's a hell of a lucky guess.
Hell of a lucky guess. Hell of a lucky guess in 1989.
Wow.
And he drew it. He has diagrams of what this thing looked like and how it worked. And it essentially looked exactly like that little model that's on the desk there. And that he felt like the whole it didn't make any sense. He said the whole thing, it didn't have any seams, which now we understand 3D printing, right? So now we know that we can actually,
but only now, not back then, right?
Of course.
Everything had rivets.
Exactly.
The skin of a craft was the skin of an aircraft. And it had rivets and had nuts and bolts. And
exactly. But now, obviously now we have carbon fiber. We have a bunch of different ways of constructing things. But back then, he didn't know what the fuck that thing was. He said it looked like it had all been melted, like into place, like that it had been like almost like smooth, like wax, like melted wax. And that it had no instrumentation inside of it, and it was designed for very small things, like something that was like 3 feet tall. And that all these things seemed to operate through the being itself, had some sort of connection to the craft, some sort of strange way of interfacing with the craft that didn't have anything to do with pulling levers and moving things.
But Joe, is that really that much of a stretch? Let's look at this. We've done experiments where we've had pilots be able to control aircraft thousands of miles away with a helmet that interprets thought.
Right.
Right. So it's again.
How does the helmet is it similar to like a Neuralink setup? Have you seen the new video of the second Neuralink patient?
I have not.
There's video of him playing Counter-Strike. Is it Counter-Strike or is it is that it? So Counter-Strike, which is a very popular online 3D game, and this guy who does not have use of his body has this Neuralink implant. He's the second Neuralink patient, and apparently with each iteration it gets more and more sophisticated and better. So this is from this person's point of view, he's playing this video game entirely with his mind.
So he's better than I can with my
better
hands.
than anybody can because the first Neuralink patient we had him on, and he said essentially is like having an aimbot because you don't miss. You look at the thing you're trying to shoot at, and instantaneously your crosshairs go there.
Wow.
Yeah. So all this stuff is taking place entirely. This is all him doing this entirely with his mind.
But is that right? So if we can do that now,
right,
is it really that far of a stretch to think that, someone who's a little more advanced than us, right, our friends from out of town, realize that's the way to do it? That's more efficient, right? The speed of the processing of the brain, the processes of the brain is much faster. It takes us longer to then have to mechanically use our hands and manipulate and do things. This is almost, not quite, but almost instantaneous. You don't have that lag, right?
Right, of course.
And so that would certainly make sense. Modern warfare, not the game, but actual modern warfare, is beginning to turn to that. And we're using AI and all these other augmentation to enhance performance. And so I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
No, certainly not. I mean, just go from garage door openers to, 500, 600 years ago to today, and then cell phones, the ability to send video across the world instantaneously. All the sophisticated stuff that we just completely take for granted because it's become a normal part of our everyday life.
That's I used to give a briefing to some folks. I'm so glad you mentioned this because this goes back to the whole stigma and taboo issue. I used to have a slideshow, and I still have it somewhere, and I would discuss the Latin word prefix of para, P-A-R-A, and it means above or beside. And so what I would do is I'd say the word parachute, and I'd ask people, what do you think of when you hear the word parachute? And people would describe, obviously, something that deploys over your head and hopefully you hit the ground with a thump and not a thud, right? But something that's normal, we use every day. And then I say, what about the word paramedic? And then people would look at it and say, well, I think of a first responder, someone goes some sort of medical lifesaver that's going to be there for your benefit. And then I say when I say the word paranormal, what do you think? And people will stop for a second. Maybe they kind of give you a little sly smile. And they'll say, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean? I mean that, paranormal. The only reason why you're reacting the way you are because you've been conditioned that the word paranormal is kooky stuff. When in reality, in science, by definition, everything is paranormal until it becomes normal. The cell phone that I use every day 50 years ago, absolutely paranormal. And so I would go through this exercise of things that were once considered paranormal. For example, when the Inca first saw the Spaniards, the conquistadores coming from the reconquering, they saw them on the shores of the beach. And they saw these humans in armor riding on a horse. And they assumed, because they'd never seen a horse before, they assumed it was a single entity. It was a single monster. And that for them was paranormal. They didn't understand it was actually a human riding on a horse with, metal skin. Same thing with acupuncture. I remember a time when I was growing up as a kid, people thought Eastern medicine, acupuncture was nonsense. Well, now at the Veterans Administration, the VA, for some of my guys in combat, they actually prescribe acupuncture as therapy. It's not paranormal, right? And so there's all these examples in history where we think something is kooky and weird when in reality it's not. It's just we don't understand it yet, and we have done such a good job of stigmatizing this conversation that the moment you even say the word paranormal or you say the word UFO or anything like that, people are conditioned without even thinking about it. It's reflexive to react a certain way. And we have to first deprogram ourselves first a little bit before we can start moving forward. Okay, how do we destigmatize this conversation? Well, first of all, what's kooky? What do you think is kooky about something that's in our airspace that's performing in ways that we can't replicate? That people say, well, wait a minute. We spend millions, if not billions of dollars putting a probe on Mars to try to find microbial life. And by the way, it looks like that may happen. It looks like there actually may be some evidence to suggest that. We spend lots of money trying to find technosignatures of intelligent life, radio signatures in our own Milky Way, right? Well, is it possible within the 4.5 billion years our planet's been here that maybe intelligent life maybe found us first?